I'm Heather, and this is the Living with Addiction podcast, where I show you how you have more power than you realize when it comes to helping yourself and your child that's struggling with addiction. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Living with Addiction podcast. Happy Thursday. I have a new guest today. Her name is Andrea Seydel. And I happened to notice her on Instagram because of the name of her book and podcast. It really caught my attention because they're both called Saving You is Killing Me, Loving Someone with Addiction. And the title says it all for me because that's exactly what I experienced with my daughter when I was struggling with her addiction the first couple of years before I really knew what to do to help myself. I literally had one of those moments where I thought if I don't start focusing on myself, I'm going to die. So I just love that title because it just says it all. So Andrea, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you, Heather, so much for having me on the show. It's such a pleasure. I'm the author of Saving You is Killing Me, Loving Someone with an Addiction. And sadly, it's the reality that so many people are going through right now. I think that drug addiction is a worldwide epidemic. And
Yeah.
there's bound to be somebody in your life that, is dealing with substance abuse problems or addiction, and it's, what if it ends up sucking away your power, and it takes you away from your life. And sometimes I remember thinking in my head, oh my gosh, like, what, loving you is killing me, like trying to save you is killing me, like literally. And so, like, I went through the whole process. I did have somebody in my life that was an active addiction and was hiding it actually until he couldn't. And then I was able to take back my power, have the courage to focus on me. And actually I lost him to addiction, so I was able to, I kind of was forced to take back my power. And what's interesting is I do have training in positive psychology as a positive psychology practitioner and life coach. And I thought I had all these resiliency skills, and but nobody prepared me for the struggle and the pain and the crisis that you go through when you love someone with an addiction. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I think that it's very unique. And it's one of those things where when we find ourselves in that unexpected situation and we start looking for help, there's a lot of so many answers out there that don't agree. And so it ends up being really overwhelming. And so you told us a little bit about what prompted you to write this book, that you were in a relationship with somebody who was struggling with addiction. But could you tell us a little bit more about that and how that experience led you to, needing to share this information with the world?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It was one of the hardest things I've gone through in my life. And I'm with the school of thought that, you never want to put struggle to waste. And because I did go through so much struggle, and I did reach out to a lot of support groups and life coaches and therapists, and I drew on all my own resources and training and education. And it was very, very challenging. And I thought, you know what? I can't put this struggle to waste. And I thought that I need to publish something that's going to be a resource that can help others who might be not doing so well in a similar situation. So it's, that expression. It's like, okay, turn those lemons into lemonade. And so that's what I did. Is I have a publishing company, and I do coach people to write books. And so this was just another one of these books that I thought, this has to go to the world. And it had, like, I want it to, even, I always say, even if my book can help one person, then you know what, this is great. So the book is all, actually, it's interesting. The book is actually about finding the courage to focus on you so you can put your life back together and take back your power. So it's not about the addicted loved one in your life. It's really about you. And so what I did is I drew on all the science backed, evidence based research on resiliency. And so because that's my education, that's my training. So I really did combine the struggle that you might endure when you love someone with an addiction, and I drew on all the science of human flourishing so that people can, even though they're going through such a struggle, they can actually struggle well.
Yeah, I really like that struggling well, and I want to go back to that in a minute, but I love that you mentioned how focusing on yourself is the answer because our instinct is always to focus on the other person. They're the one with the problem. We've got to fix them. And that really is what leads to our powerlessness. It's what kept me struggling with my relationship with my daughter for so many years before I was able to help either of us, until I turned that around and started focusing on myself. But you mentioned resiliency, and I love the word resilience. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, resiliency is almost like if you think about like those really bouncy balls.
Yeah,
You can bounce, you throw down on the floor and just rebounds off the floor and bounces back really, really high.
yeah.
It's that idea of bouncing back. It's the capacity or the ability that we have when we are going through crisis and turmoil and struggle and disappointment and all these things, or trauma even in our life. We do have the capacity to bounce back. We have the ability to be resilient. Resiliency and resiliency skills are like a muscle. The more we practice them, the better we get at it.
Mhm.
And that's the whole field of positive psychology. It is the science of the bounce back factor, or the ability to flourish and the ability to, bounce back from adversity. And so resiliency, some people would argue, or positive psychology, some people would say, okay, so is it like happyology, or like, like it's always positive sunshine and butterflies all the time, when really it's not about that. The reality is that we are going to have struggle in our life. We are going to be faced with challenge. And when we love someone with an addiction, oh my goodness, we are definitely faced with a lot of struggle and turmoil and challenge, and abuse even. So the reality is that resiliency is the ability to bounce back from adversity. It's acknowledging that, what, this is hard, and acknowledge that, we are going to have negative emotions, we are going to have struggle, but what is the best and most effective way, or what are some skill sets that we can adopt in order to help us bounce back or struggle well through this adversity? So it's not pretending bad things don't happen. It's more about gaining more of these skills in order to help us so that we can, bounce back better.
Yeah, and I think that's a really hard concept to get in the beginning when you're really deep in some serious pain of, like loving somebody who's struggling with addiction. It's hard to see how you could learn from that and actually come, out in the end with by creating a better life with the skills that you have to learn to get through loving them through their addiction. And that it's really hard to believe that you can bounce back if they aren't bouncing back as well. And so I love the idea of flourishing because that's what happened to me inadvertently. Like all I wanted to do was feel better, and that was my goal when I started looking for help for myself. But it went so far beyond that because I opened my mind up to, oh my gosh, like the things I'm learning, my life actually could be better than it was before. I wanted it to just be what it was before. I just wanted to be happy. But then I realized before was broken. I needed a new normal. And so I love that you're sharing that idea about flourishing in the middle of a crisis or adversity. And also the idea that you mentioned that it's not just, I'm always saying, our thoughts create our reality, but it's not just thinking happy thoughts. It's that we can manage our thoughts and decide how we're going to think about our situation, which is going to totally shape our experience of it.
Yeah. Oh,
And
and you
so,
raise You raised such an amazing point there, is that, yeah, sometimes when you're in the muck of it, and sometimes say it's like you're in the quicksand, it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you're sinking or you're, drowning underwater. When you're in it, it's very hard to think that there could potentially be growth from this. There could potentially be learning, and there's going to be, you're going to come out the other side, that much better. When you're in it, it's very, very hard. And what we call that in positive psychology is adopting real-time resilience. So sometimes we just need simple things in the moment to help us. And that could be as simple as mindfulness. Like, one of the interventions in positive psychology is the idea of mindfulness and being in the moment and practicing gratitude.
Mm.
So for example, you can, when we go off on sometimes these worry ruminations or tangents, like, oh my gosh, like thinking, I hope they're not going to overdose, or where are they? Like, I haven't heard from the hours. It's like, maybe they're in the ditch somewhere. Maybe they're like, our brain goes off and ruminates and worries a lot. So what happens is that it's like, how can you tap into these resiliency skills? And like, but despite, like, oh my gosh, like, I am going through a real crisis right now, or I am, so the idea is that this idea of resiliency is not just, after seeing as post-traumatic growth and growth opportunities, right? It's about, okay, how can I'm struggling right now. It's self-compassion. It's honoring where you are as a human. It's like, how can I even going into self-care practices, like, calming your nervous system, like, how can you bring yourself so you don't get that, what we call amygdala hijack, where our brain takes over in the stress response. And then, we might have an anxiety attack, or we might like go into the stress response where we don't really use the logical part of our brain. So it's as simple as like, okay, maybe I need to practice right now in this moment real-time resilience. I need to deep breathe, or I need to do some yoga, or I need to remove myself from this situation. I need to go out into nature for a hike. I need to scream. I need to dance. I need to, like, whatever it is, that some, like, tapping into all these levels of resilience, such as self-care, or even if it's a real-time resilience tool, like lying in bed and practicing gratitude, like, what are you grateful for and why? Or it could be even like a heart meditation, where you just take a deep breath and you try to think about the things that you're grateful for, or maybe even thinking about a time or someone, or like a pet or an animal, that you love. So you're really increasing these positive emotions to calm the nervous system and bring you to a place that feels better right there in that moment.
Yeah.
Because we know those negative emotions can like pull us, and they're heavy, right?
Yeah, when emotions are high, our reasoning is low. And that, like you mentioned, the breath work of getting into the present moment and feeling into our body, because for me, I was totally in my head before. I was totally disconnected from my body. And I think that that's such an important skill. I mean, most of the things that you were talking about with self care and everything can get you back into feeling into your body, being in the present moment, the breath work that you mentioned. And I think that having these skills as a way of life, and not just something that you're doing to cope with what's happening, but really thinking about it like, this is how I want to live my life going forward, really serves you. Because I think a lot of times, you know, I would hear parents say, like, why do I have to do all this stuff? I'm not the one who has the problem, but it's really just so helpful to us. I know that it totally changed my life, and I can hear how happy you are and how much that it's helped you. So I think that it's such a good way to think of it, like, this is a lifestyle, not just something that I'm doing to get through this so that I can go back to the way things used to be.
Mm, yeah. And
So
it's so true. And not trying to go back. It's like, okay, like focus forward, or be in the present moment. It's like, it's almost like the only control we have right now is the moment that we're in. So if sometimes we just even need to come into the moment and do what we need to do in that moment to make us feel okay. And I remember even walking down the road one time, and I was so upset, and I, like, my mind was all on, this person that was in my life. And I remember literally having to say, like, delete, cancel, like stop my thoughts. And then I had to like go into my senses. Like, what am I seeing? Like, and I literally had to be like dog, tree, grass, sky. Like I had to bring myself into the present moment. So my mind, I just needed my mind to have a little break and just like, and say, you know what, it makes sense, and give myself compassion. That it makes sense that I'm this upset. It makes sense that I'm hurting. It makes sense. Like, and then just being in that present moment and just noticing with all my senses, what am I seeing, what am I smelling, where am I feeling this anger in my body is just, and even that just is very, it really does calm the nervous system, and it's what I needed to do to quiet that mind.
Yeah, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier and then just mentioned it again, that recognizing how you feel is a choice. Like, of course, I feel bad about this, and having compassion for yourself about it instead of feeling like there's something wrong with you for feeling that way. And that, of course, you would choose to be sad about certain situations. And that's where a lot of our power is being able to say, own, I want to be sad about this. It really sucks. And, but when you hear something like positive psychology, or I'm always talking about thoughts, you think, oh, this person's trying to tell me to be positive all the time. And like, no, we're trying to tell you where that all of your power is, and just owning that that's how you feel right now. And that's okay.
And that's okay. Even one of the chapters in my book is called It's Okay Not to Be Okay. And
Yeah.
it's embracing that even like negative emotions, if you think about it, they're there for a reason. They're actually, we are pre-wired, hardwired to have these negative emotions because they're meant to keep us safe.
Yeah.
And so in psychology, positive psychology, we call them the upside of the dark side. It's like these negative emotions are there. Like if we didn't have fear, we'd all be walking tightropes without, like a security harness on us, right? And so our we would be like extinct if we didn't have emotions. Emotions are really important, especially like negative emotions are there. The problem is though when they get taken over, or you're in these negative emotions for long periods of time, then it can have a damaging effect. So we want to make sure that we're also having and experiencing these positive emotions. So I love the way you put it too. It's not like pretending bad things don't happen. It's like, okay, I feel this. I feel anger. I feel anger in my fists. I feel it in my jaw. I feel it in my, gut. It's like wherever, like honoring. It's like, and it makes sense that I'm angry right now. So what I'm choosing to do is acknowledge that those feelings are very human, and it's very understandable that I'm feeling this way because this is hard. So
Yeah.
it's offering that beautiful self-compassion, the kindness towards yourself.
It's so important because you can't move forward without it. And negative emotions are, they always have a message of an unmet need. And so I think that everything you just said, it's so important to take the time to feel those feelings. There's nothing wrong with us for having those feelings. They're a very important part of our humanness. And but we're, everybody's always like, when you're having a bad day, don't be sad, it's okay. And like, no, be sad. Let's talk about being sad.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah. And
important.
and honoring that, like it's like, when you have a wound, you put polysporin on it, or you put a band-aid on it, like you look after and nurture it. It's like and there's an expression like sometimes you need to sit in that wet diaper a little bit, like and kind of like acknowledge it instead of like right away trying to pretend the problem isn't there.
Yeah.
So it's like it's okay, it's like sitting in that wet diaper for a little bit and honoring your emotions, almost giving yourself that opportunity to, offer yourself some self-love and care. And also I love that you brought up that idea of like your needs. What are you needing? And so that is what I recommend too to a lot of my clients, is just like, wait, when you wake up in the morning, think about what are you feeling? What are you needing? What are you wanting? And right away, just tapping back into yourself. It's like, what are you feeling? And where are you feeling it? And like, no judgment. You don't even have to justify why you're feeling that. It's like, What are you feeling? Okay, so then what are you needing? It's like, it's so funny. I was talking to one of my friends and I was like, oh my God, I feel so exhausted. And then she's like, so rest.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, like, oh my God. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe I need to rest a little, right? So it's interesting. It's like sometimes we just have to like ask ourselves the questions like, okay, well, what am I feeling? Okay, what am I needing? And it's amazing how we have the answers. And oftentimes what we're needing is things like self-care, love, self-compassion, maybe respect, self-respect. So we want to create some boundaries. Maybe we're needing, opportunities for growth and learning and like new adventures in your life, or, it's really amazing how the answers come up when you just get quiet enough and listen.
That is so important because as you were talking about asking yourself, what do I need and feel? Like, I didn't even know what I needed or what I was feeling. I was trying not to feel anything for starters. And then thinking about what I needed. Are you kidding me? I was like, not even on the list of things that needed to be taken care of. And so it's such a simple, beautiful question. And, for anybody who's listening, just stop and think about that right now. Like, what do you need? What are you feeling? I love that you brought that question.
And what do you want
Yeah. What
that
do you
you have
want?
control over?
Yes, yes, it's so good to think about, and it's just amazing to me that we don't even think about that. Like, we don't even think it for us. We're always thinking about it for everybody else, right?
And you raise such a good point too, because oftentimes we try to numb, we try not to feel, or we move on to like positive Pollyanna, and yeah, that expression. It's like it's almost like, but it's so important that we're not numbing and that we're not also doing, like things like some people they go shopping to numb some feelings.
Oh,
They
yeah,
maybe
done it.
drink, yeah. And so you want to feel the feels
Yeah.
because they're just going to be buried and they're going to come up. So, yeah,
Yes,
super
I totally
important.
agree because what I did by making myself so numb was I stopped experiencing joy and excitement and fun.
Mm.
I just was pretty flat. So my intention was to save myself from pain, but I also, cut myself from feeling all the beautiful things in life too. So I think that it's so important. Like every emotion is important. So I hope anybody who's listening is hearing that. So
Mhm.
you brought up so many great points that I just want you to maybe just say like your top three things that you think are helpful for somebody who is loving someone with an addiction and struggling.
I think that one of the main key things is the idea that, just shifting your perspective a little bit on the idea that um, it's almost like adopting this idea of hopefulness. And hope is it's really an interesting emotion because hope is one of the positive emotions that come with negative emotions such as disappointment, despair, anger, right? Like all those emotions that often we feel when we are loving someone with an addiction. Hope is that wonderful, beautiful emotion that we can cultivate. It's learned hopefulness. And this idea is that we can gain this hopefulness and we can take back our power for our own life. And so the key takeaway is that the focus needs to turn inward on you. And exactly like you said, Heather, and you often say in your podcast as well, is putting your oxygen mask on first. It's like you're not going to be helpful to anybody else in your life if you are like going and getting stuck in that quicksand, or you're drowning yourself, or you're not getting that oxygen. So I think the key takeaway is shifting the perspective back onto you will really help you in so many ways so that you can be stronger and that like it's your life. That's what you have control over. Remember, we didn't cause it. We can't control it. We can't cure it. The
Yeah.
only thing we can do is save ourselves. And that's basically essential. And this whole idea of is honoring yourself and your needs and your emotions. We talked a lot about self-compassion, is having that wonderful, beautiful, almost like how you would nurture your child, or you would, hug a best friend that's struggling. We need to also do that for ourselves. That's the key too. Yeah, taking any opportunity for self-compassion throughout this struggle, and so that we can struggle well.
Yes, I love all of those. The learned hopefulness, that it really is a skill, right? There's so many of these things that we think should come to us naturally, and we think something's wrong with us because we weren't born that way. But it's really all a skill that we have to build, like building a muscle. And then focusing on yourself. I love that because our focus is always on the person with the addiction. And so we're just totally neglecting ourselves. And then honoring yourself. It's just one of those things that, again, I really didn't even know what that meant before. And so I love that you bring that up because a great way to do it is like what you were talking about before was asking what you need, what do you want, how you feel, like really looking at yourself, probably maybe even for the first time in your life, like really looking at yourself and your needs. It's just, I love everything that you just said there. Okay, so we've talked about struggling well a few times, and noticed that on your website, and it said life isn't perfect, but we can learn and grow while we struggle well. And I love that term, struggling well, because it, again, we think that there shouldn't be a struggle or there's something wrong with us if we are. And that just makes it okay that you are struggling. And the idea, like, that you could struggle well and have that, resilience that you were talking about before, and that you could still flourish in the middle of struggle. So I love that concept. You want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think we really did talk a lot about it. And the idea is just shifting the lens to opportunities within the struggle. It's honoring your emotions, the humanness that you're feeling. It's really about, and in positive psychology, we actually don't even refer to post traumatic stress disorder. It's called post traumatic growth. And it's just shifting the lens. It's like, okay, yeah, this is hard and this is like challenging, but like, what are some opportunities for growth? And we also talk in Carol Dweck. She's done a lot of research on the mindset and having this growth mindset. And when we adopt a growth mindset, we look at things from a really curious standpoint. So even when you're amongst struggle and trauma and chaos, there are little like glimmers and opportunities. Like, how can I look at this different? Like, instead of thinking maybe, like, from a judger standpoint, kind of like, why the heck are they doing drugs, or like, like they shouldn't, do that behind my back, or the things like that. Like, if we adopt a more curiosity growth mindset, we can think like, I wonder what it's like to have an addiction.
Yeah.
um I wonder what it's like to not be in control of your life,
Yeah.
like, like things like that. So it's really, this shift allows you to show up in your life even though you are maybe going through struggle. It's like showing up, and like, despite, even though the struggle is real, I always say the struggle's real. Even though the struggle is real, it's you're navigating it in a way that's as effective as you can. And so it's looking at it. For the other thing that comes out of struggle is you actually end up having more human connection, because sometimes when we go through struggle, we need to reach out to support. We need to reach out to family members. We need people, and human connection is very important, especially when we go through struggle. Is we end up making more and new connections in our life. And
Yeah.
the other really cool opportunity that comes out of struggle is that you can then help other people with your struggle. So I always believe, like I said in the beginning, turning pain into purpose. And there's actually scientific study too, that you can be an example to others, that you can actually be of service to other people. And it's kind of like you, Heather, what you've gone through now, and you're an amazing life coach, and you started this podcast, and you're going to be writing a book. It's really amazing because it's going to make a difference in other people's lives. You're turning pain into purpose,
Yeah.
and you're now being of service to other people. And I do the same thing. I join all these support groups. I still am in the support groups, despite I lost the person that I love with an addiction over a year and a half ago. And I'm still in those groups, and I'm still offering support where I can. And then I wrote this book, and then I started the podcast. And so it's almost turning your pain into purpose, and being of service is actually one of the ways that we can struggle well as well.
Yes.
So it's amazing that there can be growth opportunities. And as we said, sometimes it's hard to see it when you're in it. Um, But it's, yes, helping others, people too, is one of the things we can do while we're in struggle to help us to be more resilient.
Yeah, I've noticed in the addiction community, so many people have experienced either addiction themselves or with somebody they love. And I think that anybody who's been through such a hard time is really like, once they figure it out, we always feel that I have got to share this with the world. Like I have the keys to the universe. I cannot keep them to myself.
Yeah, it's so important though to share, what has worked for you, even just not even that, like even just the common humanity that you're not alone. The reality is that you're not suffering alone, that like not that we want to know other people are suffering, but there's other people that have compassion and understanding of what it is that we're going through and what we have gone through. Is really important. And knowing that you have community and you have people around that share in your experience, that understand what you've gone through or what you are going through.
Yeah, and you mentioned that we don't want other people to suffer, but at the same time, I can still remember 20 years ago going to my first 12-step meeting and figuring out there were other people in the world who were dealing with addiction in their life and feeling really relieved by it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not the only one." Because
Yeah.
before that, I really did feel so alone, and that just kind of normalizing this is a part of life and more people need to talk about it and share and make it easier for anybody who's struggling with shame to reach out for help. So I really appreciate that you have done the same thing, that you've taken such a painful experience. And I'm so sorry for the loss that you have experienced, but I think it's amazing that you've so quickly turned it around and started the podcast and written this book that is going to be so powerful for helping so many people.
Oh,
Um,
thank you,
so,
Heather.
is there anything that we missed that you feel would be important to share today?
I think we've touched a lot on just that idea, and just so people don't feel alone in the process. And I think that that idea of self-compassion and just honoring your needs and honoring your emotions and recognizing that it's okay, like it's okay not to be okay, type message. And then just giving yourself a break, like give yourself a break around this, and just like and then finding the courage to focus on you, take back your power. Also take back your power of your awareness, self-awareness. Like it's like spending more time in opportunities to be in those positive emotions. What brings you joy? What did you used to do when you were a little kid that made you smile and laugh and have fun? Like
Yes.
going and doing those things. It's like tapping back into those positive emotions, even if it's just for like a half an hour walk. It's like tapping in, having more opportunities for experiencing joy in your life. Call up that friend that makes you feel good. Go out into nature and go for a nice walk and take some deep breaths. Hug your dog. You pet your dog for a while. That releases oxytocin. And I know like hugging too is a wonderful way. If you don't have anyone to hug around you, you can always just cross your arms, touch your shoulders, and rub down your arms. It's like giving yourself a hug.
Yeah.
It's really important just to tap back into those things that actually bring about joy in your life, those positive emotions. It could be reminiscing even to a time, maybe, when you were happy, when you're doing something that really made you feel joyful. It could be, yeah, there's just like sitting in gratitude and marveling and just being in the present moment is really powerful too. And recognizing beauty. It could be as simple as looking up into the sky and just like appreciating the blueness of the sky and the clouds and the sun. And yeah.
Yes, that's also good. Um, so what if somebody wants to find out more about you, find out about your book or your podcast, or get a hold of you? Where do they go to do that?
Yeah, well, everything's available at my website at andreaseydel.com. And there is a separate andreaseydel.com/saving you is killing me website. But my book's also available anywhere you purchase books. So Amazon, it's available at Barnes and Noble, Indigo, Chapters if you're in Canada. And it's also digitally available in all the distribution channels. So they can access that book. And the podcast, obviously, is wherever you listen to podcasts. And it's called Saving You is Killing Me, Loving Someone with an Addiction.
And you're
Yeah.
also a coach, right?
Yeah. I'm a positive psychology coach and I'm actually a book doula. So I help people painlessly give birth to books.
Love that.
Which is fun, yes. And that is the whole premise is I help people turn pain into purpose through written words. And so I figured I better be an example, right? So, I went through this turmoil. I thought I better be an example of turning pain into purpose. So
That's so
yeah.
good. I might need you to be my book doula as well.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. You made so many great points, and I think that this is really going to help, anybody who's listening. There's so many little easy nuggets that they can take away and just start using right away. And I love that. I think it's really important that you can listen to a podcast and just either have experience a mindset shift or take a few things that you can start doing in your life right away. And I think that we got both of those in there today. So it was
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Heather, for having me on the show. And thank you so much for all that you're doing as well.
All right. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and I'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to learn more about my work, go to heatherrosscoaching.com. If you want to help other parents who are struggling with a child's addiction, you can do it two different ways. First, you can share the podcast with them directly, or you can share it on your social media. Second, you can leave a review. Talk to you next week.